Morning, YouTube. This is Tristan Moore. I am talking today about an issue declared in my heart. It's really kind of targeted at parents. As y'all know, I'm a patient advocate, and unfortunately, this example that I'm going to be giving is about my own son, my 2-year-old son, Keegan. The average person does not ask for imaging discs. The average person does not question because that's not their training. This is something I've had to learn over the years. So I get criticized for it often, but I will tell you that I have no regrets at all. If it meant the proper care of my child, I have no shame. So the skinny, my child, my 2-year-old and I were together drawing on that board. We interact. He was on a chair because, as you can tell by the markings on the wall, he's too short to draw on it without being on a chair. I was next to him. The puppies were let out and unexpectedly, and he, in his excitement, went reaching for one. I saw that he was overly excited and went to grab his silky sport shirt he was wearing, and it was too late. It slipped out of my hands. He fell about 1.5 feet, and on this side, he hit his head, and this whole area took the brunt of the impact. He was not consolable, and so we took him to the emergency room locally in the city of Denton, the one closest to us, so I won't name the name right now. They're usually very good, so I'm not really sure what happened, but I'm not going to go into that. So triage was good. They got him in quickly. I expressed concern. I wanted a head wound, get C-spine and T-spine. The PA that initially looked at Keegan concurred, put a C-collar on. We voiced our complaints that moving his neck caused pain. I was concerned about a lump growing here and his arm. I didn't know if it was broken or what was going on. So she assured us that in CT they would be able to see any problems here, in the arms, etc., because they were going to do a CT from here to basically the end of the T-spine. Okay, great. Keegan was cocooned in the CT scanner. I got to be with him, and it was the first time he wasn't in pain. He was completely still, not screaming. So when we brought him back to the room, I kept him cocooned in pillows to reduce his pain, and he was not screaming or crying as much. He still wouldn't sit up or move. An actual doctor came into our room to tell us the results that he got from radiology on the CT scan, that Keegan had no breaks, no fractures, no brain bleeds, everything was okay. What he had was whiplash and muscle spasms, and that was what was making him cry. I questioned this, and I told him that I was concerned about a knot on his shoulder, on his collarbone, and told him that, it seemed to me to be kind of inconsistent with whiplash or muscle spasm. I didn't understand how that could be, muscle spasm. It was a knot, and I asked him, is this something that's broken? And I'll show you a video. When I barely touched that knot, barely touched it, that was his response, and that was his response after getting Motrin. Before that, it would make him scream. So, I actually have a picture of him sitting up straight. This is also after the Motrin. You can clearly see that there is a lump here. The doctor took my concern seriously, and he, felt both sides, and Keegan cried again. He looked concerned and left the room. My assumption is that he called to talk to the radiologist. He came back and said, we can't see any breaks. The radiologist says there's nothing broken. That is likely muscle spasm, and the best thing you can do for it, unfortunately, is ibuprofen and massage it several times a day. Yes. And he told me he would cry, and that was normal. and not to restrict his movement, because by doing so, it would make the problem worse. So we got home by 8 p.m. and I followed directions on my discharge paperwork and from the doctor. And my heart broke. My instinct kept screaming, there's something wrong. This isn't right. And I don't know if it was, the fact that I was torturing my child, whether it was the proper treatment or not, or what. But I ask for a copy of image discs every time I see radiology for anything. And I recommend that all of you do the same. It is your right, and you need that disc when you go to your follow-up appointments for any reason. So it's always good to get a copy of your radiology films on disc before you ever leave a facility of any kind. It doesn't take them 30 seconds to burn that for you. I popped the disc in my computer. I'm not clinical, but I do have some basic knowledge of human anatomy and physiology. In less than 5 minutes, I could see what the problem was. This is a normal clavicle. This is Keegan's clavicle. This is what I had been massaging for several hours. This is where the lump was. This is where he was screaming. Now, to make sure I wasn't being a hypochondriac nervous mother, I sent it to my pediatric nurse of a sister. And I just said, do you see anything wrong here? She immediately called me within seconds and said, get him to an emergency room now. His clavicle is completely broken. Long story short, I took him to Children's Medical Center. And he, in fact, had a completely broken collarbone. I had been massaging. You see that little splinter of bone there? Can you imagine how excruciatingly painful it was for him for me to be massaging that? I'm not going to cry, but I still feel guilty about that. So, Children's also gave him medicine. And for the first time, my son sat up. They gave him appropriate treatment. This is my son. After getting appropriate treatment, an hour within getting appropriate treatment, he had a splint and bandage and something called high set. And finally, he could walk, he could sit, he could move, he wasn't screaming. He went from this for 6 hours, and this was the best he looked for 6 hours, to this. My point here is, parents, you don't have to be a doctor to know that there's something off with your child. And at the end of the day, it is your responsibility for what happens to your child, regardless of what anybody tells you. So if something is not right, if your instincts are going off that something has been missed, think about it and make sure it's not anxiety versus instinct like I did. I talked to a family member who had experience in pediatrics, and was lucky enough that we took care of it that night. A lot of people out there aren't so lucky. So be an advocate for your child. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Press for them. And if you have a situation where someone with a PhD misses something so obvious as a completely broken clavicle that you, as a parent, can see in less than 5 minutes, find your state's local medical board and file a formal complaint. Especially in an emergency room, that person has no business practice in medicine. And that's all I got to say about that. Have a good day.